What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well, and I got my jacket on today because one of my office neighbors turned up the AC and I'm freezing. Today we're going to talk about countertransference because I'm taking a lesson from D'Angelo Wallace's rulebook.
Hi, and welcome back to me talking about whatever I want.
And I'm going to start talking about whatever the heck I feel like talking about, and that's what I want to talk about today. As is always the case, this video just reflects my opinions and does not constitute any sort of professional advice, so always keep that in mind. So countertransference, one of the basic tenets of therapy that we learn about, at least I did, right from the beginning. According to the APA Dictionary of Psychology, countertransference is the therapist's unconscious and often conscious reactions to the patient and to the patient's transference. We should probably define transference, which according to the APA Dictionary, in psychoanalysis, a patient's displacement or projection onto the analyst of those unconscious feelings and wishes originally directed towards important individuals such as parents in the patient's childhood. Now, for me personally, as a grad student, when I learned about countertransference, I had this kind of understanding that I needed to try to inhibit whatever countertransference was coming up at all costs because it was going to cause some sort of disruption to my clients. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's what was actually taught to me. That was largely just my own projection. So there it is, my countertransference towards learning about countertransference, perhaps. I need to kind of fix myself in order to be a better person because who I am by default is not a good person, is going to cause problems, etc. And so my countertransference is a problem and I need to nip it in the bud so it doesn't disrupt therapy. My perspective has since changed. Let's be clear, not all countertransference is bad or harmful or disruptive. Countertransference is just a data point. So let's talk a little bit about some of the more common types of countertransference that tend to pop up. I found this writing from the Encyclopedia of Psychotherapy written by William H. Sledge, talking about 3 kinds of problematic countertransferences. So the ones that can cause problems. So according to Sledge, the turning away countertransference includes those kinds of reactions that represent some kind of reduction in interest or investment in the patient. So this is when it's I'm bored. I just can't even pay attention. I can't keep my eyes open. I forgot what you just said 10 seconds ago. And then Sledge goes on to say another form of countertransference is the activated countertransference. In this instance, empathy is hampered by an intensely positive or negative feeling towards the patient. It's basically that type of countertransference that brings on the kind of desire of I need to fix this for my client, or I need to give them this advice. It kind of activates us into motion rather than maybe they didn't need that direct advice. Maybe they just needed us to hold space for them or develop some insight or something like that. And then, of course, another form of problematic countertransference are unconscious enactments. So this category of countertransference is when, as the therapist, we don't even realize that we start to repeat the same problematic dynamic that our clients have experienced with other folks in their lives. So Sledge gives the example of if your client has always had the issue of your parent just always forgot about their appointments and never showed up to their games and was always just not there, and then the therapist just forgets about the scheduled appointment. That would be an example of an unconscious enactment. Now for me, when I learned about countertransference, I hear about all those things and I think to myself, how do I manage that countertransference? I really like this book review that I found written by Charles Gelso and Jeffrey Hayes, reviewing the book Countertransference and the Therapist's Inner Experience. And there's this quote that they say, unfortunately, the authors emphasize the management of countertransference, not the use of countertransference, and no mention is made of more nuanced countertransference related concepts. Does countertransference sometimes have the capacity to be quite destructive? Absolutely yes. If left unchecked and we have no awareness of it, it will cause problems. Does countertransference also have the potential to be incredibly helpful and beneficial? Yes. I think when we perpetuate this kind of more negative reaction towards countertransference, we can increase the likelihood of this kind of preconscious self-deceit around the countertransference so that we just don't even know that the countertransference is there. When we kind of mentally check in with ourselves, we might be no, I don't think there's anything there, we're good. When maybe there is something there that really wants to be taken a look at. Maybe it is even enacting out something that's not so helpful or even harmful. I know that was a little bit ranty, but I've seen this happen in my own personal therapists, kind of get reinforced over the years. And then when you call out your therapist for it, because yes, I love calling therapists out when I see them doing things that I think they shouldn't be, then there's this defensive reaction typically of like, well, I've been doing it this way for 20 years. And it's like, oh shoot, I'm sorry you've been doing it this harmful way for so long, but it has this way of kind of reinforcing itself. Like, I've just always done it this way. That doesn't mean that it's good. So a big reason why I wanted to make this video, even though according to TubeBuddy, this video topic is not something that people are really interested in learning about, whatever, it's important to me, is because I really want to see countertransference as good. Even if the narrative of the countertransference is telling us to do something that might be harmful. In other words, countertransference being good doesn't mean that we need to act out whatever the countertransference is encouraging us to do. I mean, if we are feeling attraction towards our clients, if that's how the countertransference is manifesting, it doesn't mean like this is good, therefore you should enact your attraction towards your client. I'm not saying that at all. But if, let's say, you're in that position, you're a human being, and so you're finding yourself feeling attraction towards your client, rather than having this narrative of like, ooh, that's bad, shut it down, do something about it, Marie, to say, huh, that's interesting, I'm feeling attraction to my client. Let's take a look at that. I'm really curious, because if we can see the countertransference as not inherently bad, it's just information, we can have a much healthier approach to it. So it doesn't have to get repressed and it doesn't have to get enacted on, it's just data. Now, obviously the example of feeling attraction towards your clients is kind of one of the more like textbook, a little bit more extreme examples of how countertransference can manifest and also has the potential to be quite harmful if we don't manage it. But countertransference is happening all the time. It's manifesting in all the emotions that we have for our clients, or if there's a lack of emotion, that's also a type of countertransference. Countertransference is also manifesting in all the thoughts that we have about our clients, consciously and not so consciously. It manifests in things like our body language. So all of this to say, I believe that countertransference is good. It gives us useful information, and it's also something that we should approach with curiosity. So if you're a little bit like me and historically you've seen countertransference as like this negative thing that like, let's try to avoid countertransference, I just encourage you to instead open up opportunities to observe your countertransference, to see it as something to curiously explore. Even small tweaks in our language and kind of consultation supervision type contexts I think could be really helpful. I have often phrased a question to colleagues by saying something like, do you think there could be any countertransference there? And the nature of that question kind of assumes that it's possible that maybe there's no countertransference at all. So I think maybe something as simple as, hey, can we explore your countertransference might be a more helpful question than, do you think there's any countertransference? So it makes me want to go like, oh, I hope not, I don't know. And if there is, now I feel like I did something wrong. And perhaps the most important takeaway for me that you might also like to consider is that countertransference validates our humanity. I think historically, with the kind of blank slate tabula rasa mentality that we're often taught, it could feel like we need to try to eliminate all traces of our humanity in order to be effective therapists. But as I said before, when we do that, I think it just creates an environment that fosters self-deceit outside of our awareness. And so it's much more helpful to say, I'm a human being, I have countertransference, because that's the way it's supposed to be. So let's embrace it, take a look at it, get to know it curiously, and see what kind of puzzle pieces that adds into the picture of the full therapeutic frame that we're working within. Well, I know this video was a little bit less scripted and perhaps a little bit rambly, excuse me if that's true, but it felt like an important topic to touch on, as I mentioned, that I wanted to talk about. I'd be really curious to hear if my perspectives that I shared around countertransference kind of align with what you've been taught or what you kind of understand and what your opinions are around countertransference. And before we close, I'd like to thank TherapyNotes.com for sponsoring this video. TherapyNotes helps with scheduling, notes, and billing. They have a HIPAA-secure telehealth platform and so much more to help you manage your practice. If you'd like to check out Therapy Notes, you can get 2 months to try it for free with no commitment just by clicking the link in the description of this video. Well, thanks for hanging with me on this video. Hope you find it helpful, and until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.